Hello, everybody. Andy Goldberg here. Welcome back to the Founders Chair podcast. Very, very excited to have on the show today Hasib Hamid from the company MedSnapp. Hasib, welcome to the Founders Chair.
Thank you very much, Andy, and lovely to be here.
Really excited to hear your story. We'd like to start off first by just hearing your personal story, just a little bit about where you're from, family, hobbies, that kind of thing, just so we get to know the person behind the business.
Sure. So I'm from Glasgow. That's currently where I'm based, and I was born in England, in a small town called Barnsley near Manchester. But I've been in Glasgow pretty much since I've been a toddler, so you could say I'm Glaswegian. Um, Myself, I'm a doctor by background, so that's my trade, if you like. I worked in the NHS for around 6 years. And there's a story there which we can dig into, which ties into what I'm doing now, which is working on my tech startup called MedSnapp, which is a gamified medical education platform combining AI and gamification to help medical students learn.
Okay, tell us a little bit about being a doctor. I guess you're no longer practicing medicine.
I still have my license, but I've not done a shift in a while. So that I haven't got rid of the opportunity to practice. But and working in the NHS was an eye-opening experience. So I graduated, uh, you could say, the year before COVID happened. So you can imagine what that was like. And I was actually working in the main respiratory department in the biggest hospital in Scotland. So right in the thick of it. And that was my first year of work. So that was a quite an eye-opening experience, a humbling experience, but got through it. Completed my first 2 years of foundation training, got my full license, and then I actually went into a full-time teaching role, teaching medical students. So that kind of ties into what I'm doing now, and the reason for that is that I essentially seen the students that I was teaching from three different medical schools at the time. They were using the same resource that I was using around 8, 9 years ago at the start of medical school, which was a very, very basic question bank. Now, it helped people do the job, which was pass exams, but I thought this is a bit strange here. Normally, industries move a lot faster than this, and the students weren't really over enthused by using this platform, but it helped them pass their exams. So that's why I thought there's maybe an opportunity here with my background. I've always liked the educational side, and I've always been interested in the technical side. So let's explore this a bit further. Continued to work as a doctor for the next 2 to 3 years, but whilst I was doing that, I was kind of evenings and weekends working on validating my proposal, if you like. There was one or two pivots during that time, and then slowly started to work on things. And then there was a very, very steep learning curve going from doctor to being a tech founder, which I'm happy to go into as well. But that's a brief synopsis of me being a doctor.
So I am interested in knowing what drove the decision to move from being a doctor to being an entrepreneur, and what or who gave you the confidence to do it? Like, what gave you the confidence to go into business for yourself, and what drove you to make the change?
Okay, great question. So I think from a young age, I've always been slightly entrepreneurial, and there were signs there where I would in school I'd be selling things, making some money, selling to my classmates, sweets, the usual stuff. So I've always dipped my hand in business and always kind of, you could say, had some sort of side hustle going on, and I've always had an itch to do something myself, whether it's for fun or to actually earn an income. That's maybe besides the point, but to kind of be my own boss. So that's the first thing that I would say. But with regards to actually making the transition, that was a gradual process. It was definitely not an overnight thing. And I think going from a very regulated environment like the NHS and being in a set environment with set protocols and guidelines that you have to follow and safety precautions, etc., to essentially a completely unregulated environment where no one's looking over your shoulder
You can do what you want.
and there's no, yeah, you can do what you want. There's no accountability. That for the first time, like actually delving into that properly, was, you could say, a slight shock to the system is maybe an understatement. And there was a lot of learning of things, basic things that I realized I didn't know how to do. So thankfully, during that period, I was still working as a doctor, but it was it was basically like learning another profession, where nothing's clear. So you have a set curriculum in other fields, but in entrepreneurship, as you know, it's a lot of just doing and trial and error, which is a very different way of operating than say a doctor is. So very, very different, but the transition and the learning, I actually really enjoyed that piece as well. So yeah, that's kind of the overview of how I transitioned.
Yeah. So it's kind of two different sides of the same coin. Is the NHS very regulated? You're told what to do or how to do it. Maybe it removes some of the decision making that needs to happen because you've got to follow protocol. So it's good to have the freedom of being an entrepreneur, but then because nobody's telling you what to do, you're burdened with having to make all the decisions.
Yeah, I think the first thing that you realize, and obviously to go through medical school and become a doctor, you do need a certain level of discipline, but it's a regulated environment. So the university environment, whilst it's quite open and maybe different to school, you still have set things that you need to pass, set deadlines that you need to meet, and that's still the case going into postgraduate medical education, going into your training as a doctor. So there is that discipline which is always required, but the discipline I would say required in entrepreneurship is to be honest at a different level. Um, the fact that there's no accountability and no one's going to question you means that the buck always ends with you. And that's a very tough pill to swallow when, let's say, you have a bad day or you don't perform or you mess up. Um, so sometimes you do need to learn to forgive yourself at the beginning because you're learning and it is a kind of uphill battle at the start. But that was the biggest thing that I think, or one of the biggest things that I found most difficult, like I said at the start, was just that complete freedom and no direction. Like you're just kind of feeling your way around this space. And I think the other thing was that it wasn't so being in tech is in itself like a niche within entrepreneurship. So if you don't have that background, um, there's a specific way to build tech products and validate them and get them out to market really fast. I didn't know any of that. And I made, you could say, all the first time founder mistakes that people normally make in tech, but thankfully learn quite fast, I like to think. Um, and just moved on from those learning experiences. So yeah, that kind of initial learning phase. And I think I'm still in that, to be honest. I would still say I'm quite initial in that journey because as you know, tech startups are like a 10-year plus journey. So I'm definitely in the start of that.
Um, it's interesting you say 10-year plus journey. I didn't think it would be. I thought tech would, it's either going to fly or it's not going to fly very quickly.
So the reason people say roughly about 7 to 10 years is normally it takes that time to get to what you call product market fit, where essentially the flywheel spinning, you're growing month over month, and you actually have felt your way to a product which the market actually wants. So there's a lot of what you think you want to build at the start is actually very different to what people actually want. And to actually make those two things join up takes a lot of time. So Figma, who's a design platform, and IPO'd over the last week or two, they took about 4.5 years just to get to product market fit. Obviously, they're like 10 plus years into the journey, but that's why it takes so much time. And then depending on what your goals are, you might take on investment, you might bootstrap it, but if you take on investment, there's an basically an expected exit. So that could be an acquisition or an IPO, for example, and that normally takes that length of time. So that is why it's kind of around the 10-year mark.
Tell us a little bit about MedSnap. What does it do, and who's it for?
Sure. So the initial niche market that we're aiming for to get to what you say, what I call product market fit, is medical students. And essentially, what we do in a nutshell is combine AI and gamification to help medical students pass their exams whilst making it really fun. So the main thing we're focusing on is the AI and gamification, but really to make it more fun for students. So think of it as being like the Duolingo of medicine. That's the easiest way to imagine what we're trying to do. Now, there's there's a few nuances there where we're doing some things that are completely different to the market. So one of those things being simulating a patient, so having like a storyline of an actual patient's journey and being able to test your knowledge in real time based on what you would do as a doctor in real life. So things like that, we're actually trying to do differently. Um, but interestingly enough, there's no one actually trying to do anything that's really gamified in this space. And as you know, higher education is always quite slow to adapt. So that's why I saw there was an opportunity there to do something more fun. And it's now Gen Z, so they want something a bit different.
Um, okay, I'd like to hear more about your entrepreneurial journey, Hasib. So, when you were starting out, or even now, have you got people around you to support you, push you, challenge you, inspire you, or do you just work in a bubble?
Yeah, so this is an interesting point as this is something that I probably didn't realize early on is that entrepreneurship's a team game, right? It's a team sport. So you might be a quote unquote solo business owner, which I'm not anymore. I was at the start, but I now got a co-founder. But essentially, you need good people around you. You need people who are smart, experienced, more experienced than you, in and out with your field, and also have a different range of expertise. So, in summary to your question, yes, the biggest help that I found is just speaking to more experienced business owners and specifically tech founders as well. People who've been there, done it, or even failed at their first startup, but they might be on their second startup, but they have way more experience because of that experience of just going through that and failing. They might have even raised some money, etc. So just speaking to as many people and widening my network at the start was really key, just to avoid some mistakes. You're always going to make like plenty of mistakes along your journey, but hopefully you can avoid some mistakes just by taking advice and learning from other people's journeys and experiences.
What would you say has been your biggest learning as a business owner so far?
So there's a saying in tech called fail fast. Now, what that means is essentially you need to test your assumptions as quickly as possible. So there, in tech, as you know, and you can see how fast things are moving in AI, it's all about speed now. It's about getting things out there as fast as possible and trying to get traction as fast as possible. At the start, one of the mistakes I made was classic doctor's mindset, perfectionist, like I need the product to be perfect before I show it to anyone. And I'm also not going to tell anyone about it in case someone steals my idea. Now you realize it's all about execution. It's not about telling people what you have. It's actually about the execution of A, the product itself, and two, marketing it to and getting the word out there and getting distribution. So uh, those are the things that I think failing fast, just testing and getting something out there. There's this also saying that if you're not embarrassed about your first version of your product that you've released, you've launched too late. And that's very, very true in tech. So you should be embarrassed, and that's normal to have those feelings. But it's the fastest way to actually test if someone's going to pay for it, which is the main value in business, right? If no one's going to pay for what you're offering, then that's not viable business. And that's the first assumption that you need to test.
Okay, so timing is very important when you're gonna launch, right? But
Yeah.
there's a speed of execution there. So you can't jump in until you've tested, but you need to test and get on with it.
Yeah. So I would say just develop the most minimum thing that you can that is good enough. So MVP, minimum viable product, basically good enough, and get out there to the market. You can always improve it and iterate over time. But if the main, and I would also say focus it around one or two key components. Don't flesh out too much. But if one of those key components is good enough that people are willing to pay for it, that means you're onto something, and you can always improve it there.
Yeah, we have a saying when I coach business owners, especially young business owners that are just starting out, start before you're ready. Because
Yep.
if you wait until you're ready and you wait until everything's perfect, then you're too late.
Yep.
What's been your biggest challenge during the years, and how did you push through it? And who was there to help you push through it?
I think it's one of the main challenges has been funding is always a challenge for every business. I think for tech sometimes, I think for myself, especially at the start, that was a challenge before I had my co-founder because I am not so technical. So that's not ideal if you're building a tech product. So what I would say is if you're in that situation as a non-technical founder, spend a lot of time either getting someone who's good and technical and finding that right person, or now you've got these AI tools that can actually build things for you, which weren't there when I had
Yeah.
started. But now you can just prompt something like lovable.dev or Bolt, or there's a few other ones, Replit, and just get something really, really basic and just put it out to the market. So that's one thing that was really difficult because any funding that I did get would go to outsourcing development at the start, which is not necessarily the most cash efficient way to do things because technical development is very, very expensive when you're outsourcing.
Hmm.
And then there's also the sweat equity component where anyone you're outsourcing to is not vested in it the way you're invested in it. So there's a kind of mismatch there sometimes. So I would say just finding the right people to work with.
Yeah. So what's the next big thing for you in the business? Where are you going next? I mean, if you are you still in test phase? Are you live? Are you looking at the next big thing? What do your next 1 to 3 years look like as an entrepreneur?
So we have a product in the market, we have paying customers. We are not at product market fit yet, so I think that is the next stage. That's a situation in my mind where the demand outgrows our team essentially. So we can't keep up with what people are asking for and the demand for the product. So that is the ideal situation. And that's when we know really got something that has a flywheel component, and two has actual value that people are willing to pay for and tell their friends about. So there's referrals, for example. So yeah, that's the next stage. Still working towards that, but we've got a few things planned to speed up that process and validate a few things.
Well, we'll be watching. We'll be following you on the website and on LinkedIn and seeing what's happening there. What advice would you have as we start to wrap up? What advice would you have for other young startups or would-be startups, entrepreneurs that are thinking about going out on their own or who are just starting out?
So I would say surround yourself with more experienced people, build a network of people who are willing to kind of almost take you under their wing and that you can ask for advice. The second thing I would say is start even when you don't feel you're ready. So it is always going to be tough. It's always going to be like an extremely difficult learning curve that you have to go up, especially if you're not been an entrepreneur before. But that's normal and the same for everyone. And it's often in those moments when you doubt yourself that actually kind of makes or breaks an entrepreneur, I feel. Because those are the times where it's easiest to quit. And it's often, or sometimes, the people who are just stubborn enough to keep going no matter what, and no matter what people think, that actually make it and are the overnight success stories, if you like.
Yeah, if you doubt yourself every time you make a mistake, you're never going to get anywhere. But making a mistake is a critical part of the learning process, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's reframing what you think is failure as well. It's failure is learning in entrepreneurship. So that's how we should think about things.
That must have been a big mindset shift moving from being a doctor to an entrepreneur because you don't really want to be making mistakes as a doctor. Uh,
Yeah.
as a patient, I certainly don't want you making mistakes. But as an entrepreneur, it's just part of the journey, isn't it? It's just part of the fun. Like you can look at it like that almost.
Yeah, there was quite a few mindset shifts that I had to make. One of those was what you mentioned, which is just reframing how I think about failure and mistakes. Um, and I guess that ties into the perfection aspect and the kind of safety training that you have as a doctor, and really separating medicine from entrepreneurship. So you're right, yeah, just seeing the mistakes as a natural part of the learning curve.
And I did just want to ask you a follow-up question as well. When we're talking about getting advice and seeking out more experienced people to help you or mentor you, maybe. Um, when you do ask for advice, how do you find people respond? Because I talk to some people and they shy away from asking for, oh, this person's too busy, this person's too successful. I feel bad asking them for their time or asking them for their expertise. But what is the response you normally get when you seek out maybe more experienced people to help you on your journey? What's their response?
I think people would be surprised. So people are naturally bashful when they want other people's time or asking people for help. But if you don't ask, you don't get, and you'll never know because there's many cases where even really successful entrepreneurs have replied to emails from supposedly people who are anonymous who no one knows about. So you should always take the opportunity, and this is just part of being an entrepreneur. Always take those opportunities. Just don't be afraid of no's. No's are part of the journey or being ignored. Or sometimes people are too busy. It's not even that they're being rude, it's just people are too busy and they miss your message or they forget about it. Um, so just ask, and you never know what you'll come across.
And I guess if you're in a business where you've got to get funding, you really got to get used to getting no for an answer.
Yeah.
You got to be okay with that.
Yeah, I mean that's a very good point. If you're involved in raising investment, you're going to have around 100 no's to one yes, and it's always a yes that ends up converting all the other yeses.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's just part of the game.
Well, Hasib, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. You've imparted some really good wisdom for for young entrepreneur and young business. You've seen a lot, and there's a lot that people who are going to listen to this can take away from that. So really appreciate you being on the founder's chair. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Andy. It's been lovely talking to you.
And I just want to say thank you as always to our viewers and listeners for tuning into the founder's chair. Plenty more to come from, but today it's all about Hasib Hamid from MedSnapp. Hasib, thanks again.
Thanks, Andy.